Wow, disturbing news that is going to be a disaster for the housing market. Before we get into the video, do me a favor, smash that like button, help me get this video in front of more people, subscribe if you haven't yet, that way you're notified when new videos drop, and when you do need a realtor in Utah, remember, Thinko the Realtor has your back anywhere in Utah. Now check this out, this is just disturbing. This is a disaster. They increased the loan limits, the conforming loan limits to $802,000 up from $766,000. And I'm actually going to show you how much they've been increasing these conforming loan limits. It's disgusting. This means that somebody with just a 5% down payment with minimal requirements can now almost buy $1 million house with just 5% down. That is absurd. Essentially, you can buy a house of $840,000 right now, put 5% down, and you would be within this conforming loan limits that they're updating now to $802,000. I want to show you guys what they're doing here. Look at these increases, right? They had some modest increases, but back in the day, they would actually stop. They said, okay, we've increased it. Let's go a little bit slower now. Then they would increase it more, and then they would stop. But look what happened in 1997. From 1997 to 2006, so essentially in 9 years, they doubled the conforming loan limits. And then they did the same thing prior to actually to 0809. They paused and they did not increase these conforming loan limits. Then they started increasing them in 2017, and then look what they did during the pandemic. They increased it from 548 to 647, $100,000 increase in the conforming loan limits. I mean, low interest rates, low inventory, bidding wars everywhere. But hey, let's not solve the issue. Let's just increase the conforming loan limit by 100,000, so now even more people can bid up with 5% or 10% down with low requirements, lower credit scores. Let's just increase these. And then when we hit the peaks of 2022, you know what? Let's do almost another $100,000 increase. I think that's a great idea. Then let's do another 40,000, and then this year again another 40,000, and yet the housing market, the prices are not going up. So we don't need this, but they're trying to stimulate the market, and that's why we're seeing the upticks in the spring, because they're opening a group of buyers that can buy with lower requirements. And last year, what they actually did with FHA is disgusting in itself. I mean, they essentially want to destroy the middle class. They don't care if it ever exists ever again. And I want to show you guys here, look at this. Look at the amount of money that they are just printing since we went away from the gold standard. I mean, that is disgusting. And if we take a look at the conforming loan limits, look what they've done. They've increased them as they're printing that money. Now, conforming, and I'm actually going to show you something over here with FHA, because what they're saying is, look right here, these are less than stellar credit history, but yet let's increase these substantially. But before I do that, I want to show you what's going on with home prices. Essentially, this bubble has either gotten bigger, where when they just kick the can down, when it does finally burst, it's going to be a much worse housing recession than we would have had if they would have just let the free market outplay itself. But also, since they're just printing this money and they don't really care about it, I'm actually going to show you what happened today in articles why the interest rate actually did a U-turn, is going back up because of the amount of money that they're printing. So now maybe they're going to be able to pull off that soft landing, because spending money is just a new thing. Nobody's even talking about the national debt. Neither presidential candidates talking about the national debt. They're not even asking them, what are you going to do about the national debt? And the Republican and Democrat Party, they've in 2022 said, hey, you know what, the debt ceiling, let's not worry about it until 23. And then in 23, they said, let's not worry about it until 24. And others saying, you know what, let's just push it on to 2025. So they literally do not know what they're doing. And the national debt is just something. Anyway, you see these prices here. They peaked in May, essentially May, April, June in 2022 nationwide, and then we saw those consecutive 9 months of price drops. Here in the Greater Salt Lake area, it was upwards of 15%. Median price went from $600,000 down to $510,000, and that was a 15% price drop. Nationwide, it was about 10%. Then we saw an uptick. Well, this had something to do with it because they increased these conforming loan limits again. And then what ended up happening was downward trend in the second. So you're seeing it nationwide and here in Utah. Uptick in the spring, second half is the better time to buy. However, nationwide, we actually reached new highs. So we have reached highs that were higher than in May of 2022. That's actually not the case in the Greater Salt Lake area. We still have not hit, even during the peaks in 2023, the peaks here in 2024, And now, of course, we're in a downward swing here in the second half of 2024, but we did not come back to the peaks of 2022. So you're seeing here, if these prices have kind of, the peaks have been holding steady here from 2022 all the way into 2024, and we see the downward trend. So what is the point of increasing these loan limits another 40,000? It's just because they want to kill the middle class. They want to either pull off that soft landing, or they want to cause the housing recession to be much worse. And then right here, if you take a look at this, FHA loan limits. So these are government-backed mortgages that make homeownership more affordable for borrowers with limited down payment funds and less than stellar credit histories. So that's not my words, that's theirs. Less than stellar credit histories. And it used to always be a percentage of the conforming loan limits. Well, they kind of changed that here in 2024. So if we go over here and we analyze that, it should be $498,000. However, they said, hey, you know what? If you are living, and now half of America essentially is going to be exceeding that, because half of America is now essentially what California was in 2019, or getting to that. So essentially half of America is California. I mean, it's just absurd, and they're actually making this worse. So they're saying, for example, here in the Davis County, they actually said Ogden, but Ogden's in Weber County, so they don't even know what cities are in which. But this is actually FHA. If you read up here, FHA.com, 744,000. So right here, Duchesne County is 498. But if you're coming down and you're looking at these, right, then they have Salt Lake County, Morgan County. So they essentially are saying $600,000, $700,000 loan limits with, and again, these are not my words, theirs, less than stellar credit histories. Now you're allowing essentially people with FHA loans to get the same loans as somebody with a conforming, as long as their debt to income ratio, which FHA has higher debt to income ratios. You can go up to essentially 56%, I believe it is, in your debt to income ratios, whereas on conventional it's 49%. And this is why Wells Fargo in 2023 got out of the mortgage lending industry, because they saw that there was a lot of risk brewing. And if we look at jumbo requirements, these jumbo requirements had a minimum credit score of 700, and a conforming, you can actually get a conforming loan with a 660 credit score. 660 credit score with just a couple of months of reserves. Well, a jumbo loan, you have to have a minimum of 700, or most often it's even higher. Higher is often required. So usually a 720 or a 740. A down payment of 20%, but it can be as low as 15 if the borrower has more cash reserves. Debt to income ratios have to be low. So it is required so that the borrower can comfortably pay the principal, interest, and taxes. And they're saying, hey, these jumbo loans, we're lending you such huge amount. So if one person defaults on a jumbo loan, it's as if three people, well, back in the days, as if three people defaulted on non-jumbo loans. Right, a jumbo loan could be 2 million, 3 million. But now we're essentially allowing people with 5% or 3.5% to buy houses of $700, $750, $850,000 or $840,000 with minimal requirements, minimal down payments, just as long as it's within conforming guidelines within FHA, Fannie and Freddie guidelines here. Now, they're essentially going to print their way out of this. They really are. They're going to either print their way out of this. If we went to basic economic principles, 99% would see a recession. But we see that there isn't. They're not allowing the free market. They're trying to avoid the recession. And right here, this is actually something to pay attention to. So if we take a look at this right here, the 10-year Treasury yield surges to highest since late July, nearing 4.2%. What that's actually caused is a U-turn in interest rates. Look over here to the end and at the right. You're seeing massive increases now in the interest rate because the 10-year is jumping. And why is that? Worries about the deficit spending after election, the U.S. government debt. So they're just, I mean, it's devaluing the U.S. dollar. And right here, the U.S. budget deficit in the fiscal year of 2024 swells to the third highest level on record. So 2024 is the third highest year that we added to our national deficit. The only 2 years higher than that were 2020 and 2021, the pandemic years. And what they're actually saying, the reason these interest rates are going up, neither president, neither presidential candidate, the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, I've already said, they've kicked this debt ceiling from 2023 into 23, then into 24, and now into 25. And the presidential candidates, neither one of them are going to tackle the national debt. It even says it right here. Despite there was no major market moving that on Monday, but yet Treasury yields climbed, increasing. And that's because the 1.8 trillion deficit in 2024, and it's likely to grow regardless whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump as president. So both presidents are going to just print an enormous amount of money, just as much here as Biden did, or maybe even more, adding more to the national debt and not really solving the national debt crisis that we're having here in America. And this is something that is definitely brewing out there, and you see this. I mean, this printing machine just never ever stops. I mean, I wish I could get this machine for just like a minute, I guess, because it just prints. I guess it doesn't need ink, it doesn't need paper, it's all just on demand. I mean, it just prints an enormous amount of money here. And I mean, you're just seeing it. The conforming loan limits are increasing with the amount of money that they're printing. And then if you take a look over here, under contracts are higher this year compared to last year. So now we're seeing under contracts kind of heating up a little bit. So we have 4,200 compared to a year ago of 3,600. But we see that we also have essentially 2,000 more units active on the housing market. Now, this does not mean that we are back to pre-pandemic levels or pandemic, not even close. These under contracts at 4,200, if we actually hop over here to 2019, we had 5,800. 2018, we had 5,800. So essentially here we're lower by 1,600 prior to the pandemic. And then if we go during those pandemic years, we had over 7,000 under contract. So we're not even anywhere close to that. And then if we analyze this over here, look at this supply, right? This blue line is 2024. We're going to have and we've essentially peaked for the year, but we're much higher. And that means we're probably going to start somewhere with 8,500, maybe even 9,000. I don't think so, but definitely 8,500, 8,700 units to start the year, meaning we're going to have much more inventory to start the year. And we don't have the under contracts at 7,000. We obviously have 8,000 active units to start the year in 2023, 2024, and we're going to have over 8,000 to start in 2025. And in 21 and 2022, in January, we had 2,000 units. And that's why you had those bidding wars at 100,000, because you had only 2,000 available units, and yet you had under contracts at 7,000. Well, we're only at 4,200. We're going to have much more inventory. Listings are increasing year over year. And then over here, if you take a look at the sales, we're essentially at 34,200 in 2023. This year in 2024, we're probably going to be same thing, 34,000, maybe 35,000 units sold. So we're still negative 13,000 compared to 2019 and 18,000 compared to 2020. So we're seeing that, nothing is indicating that things are just going to blow up. However, we definitely are going to see that upswing. And if they are able to pull this soft landing because of the amount of money that they're just printing into the economy, it's going to be a disaster. It's going to be a disaster because the middle class is either going to be dead, and we're not going to see the downward trend in the second half of 2025 if they really are able to pull off that soft landing and just continue printing money without any regards to anything. I guess money is just going to be fake at that point. However, if the bubble is going to pop, they're just making it bigger and bigger and bigger. And why? Well, if you go back to 2008, 2009 over here, you see that the loan limits were 417,000, the conforming loan limits, right? Well, now if we are at $800,000, we essentially doubled it. So let's say you have 1 million foreclosures happen at the end of 2025. Let's just, for example, that would essentially money-wise, dollar figure-wise, be the same amount as 2 million foreclosures in 08, 09, because the loan limits on the houses are much higher right now. So you're kind of seeing this thing, if they're going to be able to print their way out of it, or if they're just causing this bubble to be bigger. I'm going to keep these videos coming as these articles are coming, as this data is changing. I'm going to keep you up to date, so smash that like button. And remember, when you do need a realtor anywhere in Utah, Dinko the Realtor has your back.